It's so great to be here, y'all. Nice to meet you. My name is Mariana Palacios. I lead social impact and sustainability at Justworks. We're an HR tech company that basically does all of the nitty gritty of workforce management from payroll, compliance, taxes, all that good stuff. So small businesses can worry about their business and not have to worry about how they're being compliant and like paying their people essentially and like growing their workforce. Um, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about how we focused on depth versus breadth in order to evolve our grant making strategy and really drive deeper business impact and like align our initiatives to what's going on in the business. And so that'll this is sort of like the crux of how we've done this, and really like the main program that we've done this through is justworks.org, or capacity building grants. They're actually live right now. We're taking applications until November 14th. I'll talk a little bit more about what these grants are, but I wanted to just like throw that out here today because I think this is kind of like this is our ending point, and so I'll be talking about to how we got there today. So at JustWorks, we're incredibly mission driven, which I think it's like one of the most unique um, things about working here and being able to do this work here. You know, our mission, our vision really is a world where starting, running, and joining a business is accessible for all. And it is sort of very felt across the organization that people are aware that entrepreneurship is one of those opportunities to access much more grander things like economic mobility, meaningful jobs. Um, and so that's like really, really felt in our company at like all levels, all roles. So it again puts us in a place where what I'm going to talk about later is really like aligned and it makes a lot of sense. And so with this mission and sort of this like really, really strong setting in 2021, our former CEO and founder, we were kind of going through the process of like becoming a public company. And so through that, our former CEO and founder was always thinking a lot about how are we giving back to the communities that we operate in, and sort of, you know, we're based in New York, and he always really thought a lot about how are we showing up for New York, how are we showing up for the markets that we're operating in, with this sort of like idea of, you know, the experience of the small business owner, the experience of the entrepreneur. And so with that in mind, we committed 1% of our equity through what 1% pledge. And since then, we've been really active as sort of one of their like builder companies in the movement. We're still private, so we still haven't done like a formal like equity giving. We don't have a DAF or anything like that. But through that commitment, we really, really sort of like established leadership support, right? So it was really coming from like the top saying, regardless of how this like goes, we're committed to giving back in some way, shape, or form. I joined after this had happened, and so I actually came on to the organization when we were preparing to do the launch of our first grant, which was sort of like initiated because of this commitment to pledge 1%, and that was back in 2022. Um, at that time, the grant was sort of being led by collaboration of internal folks from a couple of different departments. My team didn't really exist, um, and so we kind of all came together, and it was really clear that our mission was really to be able to support entrepreneurs. And so the grants were focused on supporting 5 different nonprofits that themselves support entrepreneurs, and we were really like investing in their programs because we really wanted to see sort of like that direct to beneficiary impact, which is like obviously I think, you know, very common in the philanthropy world. And so I say that to say that I tend to reflect a lot about that because I also spend some time in the nonprofit sector. And so kind of like finding the balance between the operational capacity of a nonprofit and the sort of programmatic support that you give us funders, I think a lot about. And so when we did these grants, you know, again, program driven, we have these 5 amazing nonprofits that we're working with. And then throughout sort of that, it was a 1 year grants. Through that 1 year engagement, you know, we're having check-ins. I'm building trust. I'm building, you know, very, very deep relationships with the folks at the nonprofits, really getting to know them beyond the program that we are funding. And I start to realize that there are these sort of like common themes and threads that I'm hearing from them, right? Like I'm asking obviously about, you know, how is the program going along? how many entrepreneurs have you like do you have in this cycle? How many have, sort of graduated, gotten all the grants? And we're talking about all those like really interesting and cool metrics that speak to their direct impact. But then I'm also asking them, you know, what else is on your mind, right? Like these are small nonprofits. So a lot of the times I was talking to like directly to the executive directors of the nonprofit, and they all really had, I think, like three main things that kind of kept coming back into our conversation. Um, First one was like the workforce development, leadership development, like retention of talent, and how they could sort of really empower their people and like just have really great workers do amazing work. The second was sort of tech. How can they be like more enabled through tech? They really talked a lot about like systems, and so a lot of the conversations were around, the CRM, or like how do we like manage our internal information and how do we deal with those things, right? But it really all sort of revolved around this like idea of like tech. And then the last piece was around more efficient operations and diversifying their funding. And so, we're in this year where like the clear mission of our grants is to support the entrepreneurs. I mean, that's our mission as a company. So it's incredibly mission aligned, right? We really know kind of like where we're going with that. But I'm having these conversations with the nonprofits who have a very mission, like their mission is the same as ours. And, I think a lot about sort of we're all rowing in the same direction, right? And kind of what is the role that Justworks can have as we all row in this direction. I was just really reflecting about that. And so we get to the end of that grant cycle. We're having some internal conversations about what it means to do another grant cycle. We are gonna have to like pull back a little bit of the funding that I had, or like the pool of money that I had to do this work. And so that's when I really kind of realized, all right, I think this is the opportunity for us to try something new and maybe like innovate a little bit and see how it goes. And I say that to say that I think starting with those reflections, I was already thinking about what I wanted to end up, which is kind of like what we have today, right? Like I was already thinking about, well, what does it look like to do capacity building? Like these are the things that they actually need from us. Project funding is like much more readily available for them. So what does it look like for us to actually invest in them, right? It's very mission aligned. We're the backbone of like many HR teams, or like founders, I mean, that manage their whole workforces. And then on the other side of the coin with that, I really started thinking about like trust-based philanthropy and sort of like a longer term engagement. I was very conscious of the limited budget that we were having, and even in 2023, when we kind of had sort of the announcement that we're going to do less funds, I was really thinking, okay, well, if I've been able to really drive these deep relationships with these folks, can that like also take us to a place where we have just like deeper impact, right? Like what does it look like if we just like instead of 1 year work with them for more than 1 year? So I already had that in the back of my mind, but I was like, let me see how folks are feeling about this. So in 2023 we doubled down, and so what I did was actually propose that we actually renew the grant with three of the organizations out of the five that we were working with, same amount. Um, and that got approved. And so the way that I framed it was, we've been working with these organizations. We know that they're successful at what they do. I would actually love to ask them what they would want to do with this grant money, because there was already that trust in that relationship. And so we kind of did like an open sort of project. You can do whatever you want with this money. We're committing to you for another year. And then throughout that process as well, we were able to, again, since we're building stronger relationships, I'm able to bring some of them on to all hands. I'm able to connect some of them with our sales teams. I'm able to bring our CEO to some of their events, right? Like you're kind of getting into this like multi-layer partnership is what I'm calling it now, that really allows you to go beyond a dollar, essentially, right? Like, yes, we're giving money, and yes, it's a very like transactional relationship, but there's so much more to gain when we kind of like double down and say, what else is like important to you? What else is important to me? And you treat it as like a partnership. And so sort of through that as well, two of those nonprofits ended up becoming customers. Really, like I literally say this all the time, like I had nothing to do with that. Like they came to our office one day because of like being in the space, connected to one of our sales folks. They like reached out to me and they're like, hey, like this is something that someone reached out to me about. And I was like, listen, I am your partner on this side, and whatever you decide to do, like you decide to do. Obviously, you know who we are already, and you have a sense of what we stand for and how we like to do business and how we operate. And so, know that like whatever comes from this interaction with our sales team is going to be like as authentic as everything else that you've experienced. Um, and we ended up actually bringing them on as customers, and one of them is actually also signed on as a partner because they saw sort of like the benefit. But again, not from this side of like we're trying to sell you. It's just like you're getting to know us just as much as we're getting to know you, and it just makes a lot of sense for us to sort of work together in different capacities. And so we go through that full year. Again, that's multi-layered sort of partnership. We get to engage in a lot of different ways. And we get to 2024, and I think so our grant cycle, the 2023 grant cycle ended in like the beginning of 2024, sorry, towards the end of 2024. And so this is 2024 really kind of coming into 2025. But yeah, we're thinking about how do we start a new grant cycle. We've had these two years with these amazing nonprofits. They're part of our ecosystem. They're part of our partners. And new administration comes in. We also internally have layoffs. So there's definitely like a lot of tension and this sense of like slowing down that we experience. I think we were gonna launch our grants. I think I'm gonna sort of make it up, but I think it was like mid-February, and then like February 10th, we like had to lay off a bunch of people, right? So when you're thinking about what does that mean for the company and how you're positioning yourself, it was really sort of hard for us to navigate and push for an immediate sort of like release of the grants anyways, right? Like, let's just keep moving forward with this. So what that allowed us to do though was to kind of take a step back and look at our social impact as a whole, which I think, in the moment, I was definitely candidly like extremely frustrated because I've been working on this for so long and I'm really passionate and I see the opportunity. Um, but I actually think it was kind of like a blessing in disguise because we had been, again, really kind of moving through all of our social impact from a very programmatic point of view. And so there were all things that made a lot of sense, but there wasn't this kind of like through line that allowed us to kind of connect why these things made sense, right? Like, yes, we do like our skill-based volunteering. It's mission driven because we support entrepreneurs. Okay, it's aligned. But there wasn't like more like language and contextualization for us to like leverage that conversation with leaders of different areas of the company in different places of the company with different priorities of the company. And so what we did during this time was actually like sit down for a little bit longer and work on like that proven concept and business impact. And so I had done a bunch of like reporting, both quantitative and qualitative, with the grants throughout the 2 years that I was working with them. And that was actually really key because I was able to get some really, really great like quotes and experiences um, from our like grantees and how their experience was working with us and having a grant that was very like open in its capacity. But then I was also get some like actual data points on no, but they're actually also being successful. They're getting to their outcomes. They're actually showing that they are growing. This is how they're growing because I've been close to them and I can see. So we're fortifying that. We're also building on our narrative around social impact and kind of what it is that we want to do through social impact, which we sort of landed. It's still kind of like in flux, but on this idea again of like economic opportunity and how for us entrepreneurship is the avenue for that. So it's a little bit more than just our um, just how we show up in that moment in time where an entrepreneur needs us, but really it's like how can this actually change an entrepreneur's like life, and we can be in a lot of different places and in a lot of different ways through the ecosystem in that way. And so this is a moment where we kind of like fortify that value add and like make it very crisp and clear for folks as we're sort of navigating all these changes internally. And this is always, kind of happening in the background. And so we get to 2025, we're at a point where, kind of, I would say, I guess, if you can say that the dust has settled after all the changes, people are a little more like I guess, open and have more like room to breathe and think about different things. And so we actually go back to our leaders and we say, um, based on everything we've seen, this is actually how we set the stage for the future. Like these grants are actually going to be how Justworks shows up in a different way because we have a very unique perspective on how to support entrepreneurs, right? And so, yes, we can also support entrepreneurs directly through programs, but how much more unique and innovative and different, which are all things that are very aligned to our values. I'll say, right, we're like very tech driven company. It's all about like innovation, trying new things. The lean startup, so like it's kind of like really how we go through a lot of our programs, even on our product side. And so we just really said, we've been testing this thing out for 3 years now with these relationships and this like concept of what does it mean to go like deeper in the relationships that we have with nonprofits, and what way of going deeper than to like actually be invested in the organization, right? So we sort of framed it as, this is not like us doing just philanthropy, this is us being invested in these organizations that have the same mission as us, and that honestly are, serving our future customers. Like they themselves can be our customer, but they're serving our future customers. They're serving the people that we care about, right? So if we're able to support their know-how already, right? Like we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We know that what they're doing is already like working. They're sort of getting at like some of the main challenges of entrepreneurship: access to networks, access to capital, like access to like quality knowledge and like tools, right? Like they're doing all of that. So why don't we just sort of like expand and like double down on that impact that they can have? So then there's more entrepreneurs that are growing, and then they can need and like come into sort of like our ecosystem in that way. And I actually don't have the numbers, but I know that a lot of the like nonprofit partnerships that I talk through with folks always sort of say like, oh yeah, a couple of entrepreneurs use your platform. They like leverage your platform to do this, right? And so sort of this is how we like frame the next phase of our grants. In this is how we like set the stage for the future, again with the idea of like this is just a start of all these relationships and there's so much more that we could do. And so that actually got organization and our leadership really, really um, energized. I think we launched about 3 weeks ago. We launched on October 6th. And again, I've been doing programs here for almost 4 years at Justworks, all like social impact related. I've never seen people be so excited about something that comes like from our team that has this like external like lens. Also, when we're spending all this like money in general, right? People are always kind of like fighting for dollars, and so I think it really speaks to us being able to frame again sort of the vision of where we wanted to land, which was in a place where there's more trust-based philanthropy like engagement in our grant giving, as well as like a good standing at the company and like a good sort of recognition of the value of this work beyond the feel good value of this work. um, and so that was kind of like how we were able to achieve that and to get there. Some of my main key takeaways throughout this process were really sort of I've mentioned this a couple of times, like having that clear vision and being patient. Like this was almost 4 years in the making for us. But as I mentioned, I was thinking about it like the first moment that we were in the grant cycle, like the first grant cycle. I was already thinking about, well, what can these be like? Where do we actually want to go, and where could we actually give much more value as funders in this space? The stories and the data will be your best way forward when you think about, I think a lot of us may engage in conversations that are around like how do you like get business buy-in and whatnot. So like stories and data will allow you to sort of adjust your narrative to the priorities of the business at the time, right? Like I think when we pivoted a little bit, again, I really centered on, the idea of like these are our future customers. And this takes me a little bit to the third one, right? Like I think there is a balance to be found between doing good and like doing business. Like some folks might feel like it can be a little tough to say, all right, well, let's turn these beneficiaries into like our customers. I actually happen to like really believe in our product as well. And so I can see how our entrepreneurs that we are able to support through supporting these nonprofits could actually really benefit from having our product. And to the vision idea, sort of like the next thing for my team is, again, we've already set the foundation for this grant, have those relationships, have also shown the organization that we can bring value in a lot of different ways. And sort of like the next thing in our horizon is thinking about, okay, well, how accessible our product is, right? If I had tried to go there first, I probably would have like flopped on my face. So it's like keeping that sort of that like the story you're telling with what data you have to tell the story, and then balancing the being the doing good and doing business part, I think is really key. And then lastly, like, again, 3 years in the making, 4 years in the making, plant seeds early, like find the people that get a little bit of a twinkle in their eye when you talk about X, Y, or Z. Like nothing you say is like completely set in stone. Like see what's important to them, and ask the questions. Like I can't tell you how many conversations I had about, and I would share like, like I've been thinking about this, like I saw that this other organization, this capacity building thing, this is what it means. And like I just think like how cool would it be if we were able to do something like that? And then based on the reaction you get, like who your people are, and they already had a conversation with you about this. So the other thing that I noticed is that I think we were really good about doing that across the business. And I don't think anybody was like incredibly surprised. It was kind of like a long time coming. And I think sometimes we want like the wow effect with our programs, but like a long time coming is also great because you got there. And that's like ultimately what we want, right? So I think those are sort of like the main things that I have reflected on as I was kind of thinking about this. And yeah, we got our grants and they're out there. And I mean, this is a slight plug if anybody knows nonprofits that are supporting entrepreneurs that could use some capacity building and some funds to really work on whatever thing that they need to like scale and like sustain themselves in this like really, really challenging times, then please send them our way.
All right. If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat. I guess this could be also a question, but more so a comment. So Mariana, you and I have had several conversations about the work that you've been doing and kind of the evolution of your team's work. And one of the things that I get really excited about, because we always talk about business value and really leveraging impact to drive business, and in terms of the future of the work and where, in my opinion, the field needs to go to reach a
Mhm.
level of sustainability and stickiness, the one thing that gets me really excited about the work that you're doing is that you've built relationship with nonprofits, and you're using the grants to support them and help them with their programming. But with the relationships that you've been able to build with them, it turns back into driving business value by turning them into customers. And like you said, it wasn't like you were trying to sell them on anything. It's just because you built that relationship with those organizations and you're supporting them with the capital side, and obviously with your expertise and your team's expertise, that they felt comfortable enough to go to your team and say, hey, we want to use Justworks in our organization. I think that is a great example of how impact can drive business value as well as community value too. And just I just wanted to underscore how valuable that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just, I think if you have a good product too, right? Like to me, it's really easy to be able to say, actually, yeah, please go talk to it. And I'll say this too, like I already know who the salespeople that I send nonprofits to are, right? Because I also know who's gonna like have the sensibility and sort of the, I don't know, touch on like understanding that this is a different type of relationship, right? And so it needs to be like it needs to feel a different way, right? For these folks, I think as well. Um, yeah, so I think it's been really great to be able to see that.
When you were relaunching the grant strategy and you had to go to your leadership team and basically pitch them on kind of the new concept,
Yeah.
were there any questions that came from their side in terms of either the why or the how?
Yes, we had actually more, not the why as much, um, because I think we did such a good job of like tying it with like also like who we are as a company and what why that would make sense. But the how in how we would like measure, because I think the interesting thing about a capacity building grant is that like I'm not measuring the number of entrepreneurs, right? And most of this came from like the marketers in the room. they want to know, okay, so how many lives have we touched, right? Like how many, what is the banner that I can put on afterwards and say Justworks grant touched this many entrepreneurs, or like these many dollars gave this many people access to X, Y, or Z, right? And so I think there was a little bit of hesitation around like how would we ensure that the funds are being used in the appropriate ways. And the way that I sort of turned around was, which again is also, if you're familiar with like trust-based philanthropy, I mean, we're also a business, and like these are all operational things, right? So like using business operations like OKRs is like a basic thing, but also um, we're asking nonprofits to sort of demonstrate how a project can help their growth, and like their growth, how their growth is measured is like through their impact reports, right? Like if they're able to hire more people and like further their the reach of their programs, like that's already connected to that growth. And I actually, I mean, I kind of like put my neck on the line for this, but I actually believe in this a lot. Is like I told our leadership, part of the way that we want to show up as an organization is being like a true partner. So I'm not questioning them. They're telling me how they're actually going to measure the success, and we're following their lead because they're the ones that know their business the most. Like, who am I to go and tell them, like, which is like what happens in the philanthropy sector, right? There's so many different markers um of measurement, and like nonprofit leaders are just swarming in like different KPRs and OKRs that come from like all these different places that like truly maybe not even make any sense to them. And so um but I think the piece of this is really on like building that trust and relationship with the organization to know that they're going to actually, sort of open up, right? Like if there's a challenge in them getting to a grant, or in them getting to like one of their set objectives, ideally we build that relationship in which they can come to us and we can like troubleshoot it together.
And one of your takeaways was plant the seeds early. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the early kind of stages of your program, you and your team did go on a listening tour, if I'm not mistaken. Can you walk everyone through that listening tour, that experience, and maybe even hit on some of the questions that other stakeholders within the company kind of brought to you and your team?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I should have mentioned that a little bit more. So one of the other things that we've been doing this year is it's like a listening tour, and then like the roadshow part of it, which is, it's been a long time. It's a lot of work because you go to every team, but I will say it's actually really really worth it because we've JustWorks is about 1,300 employees right now, and you know I work really closely with very specific teams, but there's a lot of teams that like don't really know like what we do, right? They're like, oh yeah, they lead the grants, and it's like they know we're like the team that does like the really nice things, but they don't like know and understand like what we actually do. And so we actually started with like our executive leadership, and we went to them and we told them, you know what, like this is what um we really want to talk to the whole company about. And it's this idea of a leader led approach, right? So, again, we have our programs, they're standardized, like they're not going anywhere. And if anything, we can continue to grow them, but we need people to engage in the work with us. So, our work doesn't happen in a vacuum. And we also were able to like have that conversation because we included within our engagement surveys a question to our employees around their participation in our programs, and we're able to tie those responses to the level of belonging or engagement that they feel. And so, with that, and like like the setting of the structured programs, we really were able to say, you know what, like our people also want this. They want to be more engaged, and they want to be more knowledgeable, and they want to have a role to play in the programs that we run. And so we went to the leaders, we told them, we want to do this. This is like our executive, like the top level. We were able to get buy-in. There's always the question about bandwidth and like, what are you doing this? And like, why do you want to do this? And we navigated it. We said, we're going to get 15 minutes of everyone's time, which also was incredibly ambitious in having a conversation about everything that you do in 15 minutes. And then we just like started going down, like I imagine literally I grabbed the org chart and we're like, what's like so and so's team, so and so team, so and so's team, and we just went down the org chart. And when you're engaging with people within like about our work, but through the lens of what's important to them, I think that's when you get like real engagement, right? Like we didn't go into the conversation and give a whole spiel about like why you should care about this, why you should come to our events, why should no, it was really like this is what we do here, and now we would love to hear from you about what's important to you and how where do you see there's opportunities. And some teams have very openly said, you know, like I don't really see a direct way of connecting with this work today, but I honestly I commit to going to more of your events. Like we also have DAB in my team, or I commit to like, you know, sharing the grant thing, or well, now I found out that we do these grants, and like how cool is that? Like I didn't even know that we did that. So I think it's kind of like meeting people where they're at, and it's tough when you have very lean teams. Like my team is only well, we have a director and then like another program manager like myself, and she manages all the ERGs. Um, but I think it's definitely it's one of the things that I think I've done here that's been like most like worth it when you think of like time I've spent doing the thing and then like the output that we're seeing. I'm just like the output like really is like positioning our work and um our initiatives like at a whole different level in the company.
Can you give an example of one of the departments that you went to where there was clear overlap and kind of general excitement, and kind of walk everyone through what that experience was like and the conversation was like?
Yeah, let me think. I think we've had a couple of separate ones. So also for context, like we go in these meetings and again, my department oversees diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, social impact, and sustainability. So we go to each team and we tell them these are all the things. Like this is the universe, right? Which are the things that are more relevant to you? Um, I'm thinking a little bit about the accounting team, for example, which is kind of interesting because like what do you know, like how do you connect accounting to like social impact or DNI? Like I work really closely with our accounting team, but like in their day-to-day, it's like a little less clear. Um, and so we gave them, you know, we gave them our spiel and like a lot of the things that they were really, really reflective on was at this time their whole team is really focused on their own like learning and development. So they were thinking a lot about that. And then they were like, well, you know, I think also stepping into a um, a career in accounting is like very difficult, and there's only the big four, and people don't understand. Like, so the accessibility to understanding for young talent that they could be an accountant is very difficult. And they were the ones who told me, they were like, is there any like mentoring or anything that we could do, like shadowing programs that we can bring kids to, like, you know, be in the office and do that. And that's like a very like volunteer focus, actually, like employee engagement clear marker, right? Um, that came from them, but it came because we were in the meeting opening up space for the conversation, right? Which I think is like the biggest thing. Like you gotta create space for it. And then another one within the accounting team was also this idea of like responsible sourcing and procurement. Like we're still on our journey to be better at like the way that we procure internally. I mean, like our systems every year kind of change quite a bit. And I've had actually a couple of conversations with folks around like, you know, are we sourcing from minority businesses? Are we like sourcing from responsible businesses? And it kind of just varies. And that was like a big thing that came up. They were like, actually, like, let's work on this project. Let's work on this initiative. Because just having the conversation with them gave them a lot of like um, energy around that. Right. So that's two examples. One of them very sort of employee well-being focused, but is really connected to our work. And we can speak about the impact of that in terms of like retention, in terms of, you know, personal development for those folks, in terms of employee engagement and belonging. And then the other one, it's a very clear direct like engagement in like their actual work and the work, like the impact of their work in the company, right? It's like we're including it directly in like their business, um like there's business operations. And so those have been like really interesting ones. I mean, our sales team is always thinking about how can they tell the story better of um, the program that we run. Like, how do they talk about, you know, our social impact programs and our DNI programs? Um, we had a really interesting conversation with our insurance team. Again, we do like benefits and HR and all that stuff. So our insurance team was really kind of like thinking about how can we make access to knowledge around insurance be more accessible for folks. You know, it's like it's a whole world, and it's like very difficult to understand if you have never, even if you're experienced with like choosing an insurance plan, it's very difficult. I can't imagine what it's like to be a business owner that has the weight of choosing different types of insurance plans for your employees, right? So there's kind of an idea there around creating more access to like quality information that's like very digestible. Again, that's very connected to our business. We don't have to do that, but it's very connected to our business, and it's something that they look to my team to be able to like activate on.
What I really love about the whole kind of roadshow idea is that number one, you're going into the various departments at JustWorks and you are educating them around what social impact sustainability is. You know, it's not just the quote unquote good stuff. It's like there's much more that comes with this field. So you're educating them on that, but then you're also helping them achieve their own goals. And so you're positioning your team in a way like you're basically a strategic partner
Yep,
that just happens to do impact work. And I
exactly.
feel like that's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot about. I used to think about this in the sense of like making volunteering part of our DNA. Like I used to say that a lot when I first got here, and I think that that's still part of like one of the things I would love to get at, right? But I think that it is like you want to make. I think we're successful at doing our jobs if the rest of the organization is so aware of how social impact, sustainability, and D&I can like take their work to the next level, right? Like we've been describing it as like putting on the glasses, right? Like you're doing the same things, just like ask different questions, think in a different way, right? And so um I think that's like if I think about like what is it if I'm like successful in years, it's like I don't think it's kind of like losing my job, but I think it's like seeing that like my job becomes more of an advisor to the business than like the doer of all the things, right? Which is like that's what it is today. We're doing all the different programs. But if you get everybody doing their own program through the lens of D&I, social impact or sustainability, like that's how you build like one of the most responsible companies you can. Like you don't even have to be checking on like are we doing the right thing? Like you are, because in every level of the organization people are thinking about this. It's like so embedded that you can't separate it, right? um and I think like there's I don't know, there's like tremendous value in that.